Politicians at both the state and federal level are devising legislation to prevent mass shootings after two gunmen killed 31 people earlier this month. The alleged El Paso shooter wrote a manifesto or a rant saying he was specifically targeting Hispanics and Mexicans in his attack. Federal prosecutors are weighing hate crime charges against him. Because of that, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced Wednesday he's forming a task force on domestic terrorism. Abbott says the group will assist law enforcement in how to monitor and seek out other threats. He also said he will increase the number of agents dedicated to investigating neo-Nazi and white nationalist gangs. On the federal level, Arizona Republican Senator Martha McSally put forth a bill to combat domestic terrorism. She wants legislation that will make such acts of violence a federal crime. Currently, only international terrorism qualifies as such. Other lawmakers are focusing their attention on reforming gun laws, and the White House appears to be listening. CBS News has confirmed 3 senators have spoken with Trump administration officials about potential legislation. They range from Republican Pat Toomey and moderate Democrat Joe Manchin to outspoken gun control advocates like Democrat Chris Murphy. But details are slim. An official told CBS News both sides are still talking big picture and are trying to find places to agree. A recent Quinnipiac poll shows 60% of Americans support stricter gun laws, as Democratic presidential candidates have increasingly made it a talking point on the campaign trail. Let's bring in now Shane Goldmacher on set and John Moritz in Austin, Texas. Shane is a national political reporter for the New York Times, and John covers Texas government and politics for the USA Today network. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Shane, I'm going to start with you. You were just in Iowa. Are the 2020 candidates finding success in talking about gun control?
They're finding success in that they all agree on something, and they're trying to elevate this as an issue and move something forward in Congress. What they're not really finding success on is differentiating themselves, right? Because so many of them agree so fundamentally on assault rifles, on expanding background checks, on red flag laws, it's hard for them to differentiate themselves. It's hard for one of them to emerge as the face of gun control.
So it's sort of like, we all agree on this, let's move on to something we can argue about.
I mean, for a little bit, to some extent, they are always pushing to find areas of disagreement where they can, find an edge.
Stand out. Right, absolutely. All right, so John, a recent article you wrote discusses a changing attitude toward gun policy in Texas. In it, you say, quote, an emerging generation of Democratic leaders who have flipped GOP state house districts in recent elections say the mood of Texas is shifting away from the Texas storied love affair with guns. So why do these state legislators believe the tide has turned or is turning in Texas?
Well, what we're seeing happening here is not so much a change in attitude among longtime Texans, but it's a change in the definition of what a Texan is right now. There are more people coming in from other states, obviously across the border. I mean, I'm here at the Texas Capitol. I could walk outside, walk 5 blocks, and not meet a single person born in Austin, and maybe not a single person born in Texas. People coming here are bringing the attitudes that they had toward guns with them from those other states. And as we witness more and more of these horrific shootings, those people with skeptical attitudes toward firearms, they're hardening in those positions.
But John, to your point about shifting attitudes, there's a tweet I want to bring up from Governor Greg Abbott from back in 2015 when he said, quote, I'm embarrassed. Texas, #2 in nation for new gun purchases behind California. Let's pick up the pace, Texans. At NRA. So, it seems very unlikely Governor Abbott would tweet something like that today. Would you agree?
He probably would not tweet that today, just given what we've seen in El Paso and around the country, even around our state in the last several months. But that does not mean his attitudes on guns are going to be publicly changing anytime soon. He's a base Republican. His political fortunes lie in the good graces of those base Republican voters here in Texas. A lot of them are just fine with that kind of thinking. But where I was going with the story that we published last week is that, and I quote one of these young lawmakers saying, "That's yesterday's thinking." The Texans of today, those moving in, those who are coming up through age, have a totally different attitude, and it's not so much a deal killer to go campaigning in suburban Texas, even in once very strong Republican districts, and saying, "Hey, isn't it time that we bring some sensible gun restrictions," as they, in their words, to the table? And they're getting, not only are they getting a good reception, they're getting elected.
And so, what are you hearing from voters? They like this kind of talk there in Texas?
Well, in the fast-growing suburbs, yes. It used to be the family values was, protecting our morals, a not permissive society. Today's family values are protecting our kids who are afraid to go to school, afraid to go to the movies, afraid to go to church, and now afraid to go to Walmart.
Right.
And that's what's resonating with a lot of parents, especially younger parents, and those who are basically exercising their voting strength for the first time.
Absolutely. John, Beto O'Rourke is planning a major address tomorrow in El Paso. What can we expect from him? And is this somewhat a reboot to his campaign with the focus on El Paso?
It is in a real sense, I think. Interestingly enough, when President Trump went to El Paso earlier this year to kind of build support for his immigration policy, that sort of energized Beto O'Rourke to get off the fence and announce his candidacy for president. This is obviously a very different circumstances we're seeing now, where tragedy visited his hometown in the worst imaginable way. But it has seemed to kind of focus him as a political figure. I was in El Paso last week when he was visiting the site of the Walmart shooting. He didn't make an address of any sort. He just walked through the crowds, talked to people a little bit one-on-one. But there was palpable excitement in his hometown for the type of politics he's been practicing for the last couple of years, starting with his campaign for the U.S. Senate last year against Ted Cruz.
All right, John Moritz, I want to thank you so much for sharing your Texas insight with us. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thank you.
So, Shane, I want to touch on some other 2020 news. You recently were with Kamala Harris when she went on her bus tour in Iowa. I want to read some of your piece that you wrote about. You say, quote, "After months of putting the state on the back burner, Ms. Harris has stepped up her presence in Iowa, spending more days there in recent weeks than she did through June." So she's clearly changing her strategy now to focus more on Iowa. Is that right?
If you looked at Kamala Harris at the beginning of the year, it was very clear what the most important state to her was. It was South Carolina. There was once a 100-day stretch in the first half of the year where Kamala Harris was in Iowa for only 2 of those days. And there was grumbling. Iowa activists are like, hey, we come first. And her campaign has definitely made a different bet now after the first debate, that this is a place where they really want to make a stand.
And you also make the point in your piece that Iowa was crucial for Barack Obama to sort of break through, even with Black voters, over Hillary Clinton. Is she taking a page out of that playbook? Yeah,
there's a real parallel there, right? Barack Obama in 2008 was running against Hillary Clinton, who was the overwhelmingly popular candidate with Black voters. People forget she was the popular candidate with Black voters. Obama wasn't winning them. It wasn't until he won Iowa that he was broadly seen as maybe this guy can actually win, and support came pretty quickly at that point. And Iowa was absolutely the turning point. Kamala Harris was in Iowa that night volunteering for Barack Obama. She had a firsthand up-close experience at that. And so they're putting real investment. They're on air with television ads there. This was the longest trip she's taken to any state so far this entire year, 5 days. This is a real set of investment she's making, and it shows that this state, despite the early sort of maybe we're not really going to compete there, it's a particularly important place for her now.
All right, Shane Goldmacher of the New York Times, thank you so much for coming to see us.
Thank you.